Thanks, Tony. How are you?
Fantastic. Listen, while you're watching this, if you want to be part of our Remote AF community, go to remoteaf.co, click on the button at the top, join our remote community where you'll find us talking about many of the things we're talking about today. And in fact, a lot about what we're going to talk about today. Carla's going to be talking to us very experientially about how you use Remote AF because Carla's one of our guides. Carla, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself so they know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, really excited to be on the show today. Long time listener, first time caller. So we'll just start with that. And I'm just going to, I guess, talk a little bit about myself. And I'm going to really focus on the team launch canvas. It is one of the canvases that's really close to my heart, and I've used so many times and always gotten really good results from it. So if you are, maybe if you've just done the course or you're curious about the team launch canvas and how to use it, or if you are looking for different ways to facilitate it, then that's what I'll be talking about today.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's get started without further ado. And I believe you want to share a bit of a canvas as well.
I do, yes. I'll share a canvas that I've used with a client. Obviously, I've sensitized it, so you won't see too many details, but it'll give you a bit more, I guess, a bit more in depth into how I've used the canvas and how people have filled it out. So you might find that really helpful.
Fantastic. All right. Let's start with it.
Okay. First, I guess I'll just give a bit of a background on myself. So, I'm 37 years old. I've got twin boys. I had them in 2019, pre-COVID,
Twins.
and
Wow.
I
I
know
didn't
I've
either.
got my yeah, got my hands pretty full. So they're about 4 now, and I've been with Elaborate for about 6.5 years. So, um, prior to Elaborate, I had a different life. So I was working in pharmaceuticals, and so I did have a science background, and I was part of that role was testing different pharmaceutical products, measuring what was on the packet is what was actually in the drugs, and testing different compounds. So I really sort of developed those problem solving skills and experimental mindset, test and learn. Why did things work? Why didn't they do it? Did I not follow the experiment correctly? So those really lifelong skills that I was able to bring into my coaching career. So yeah, my mindset is always, I like to get to the bottom of things, really take evidence-based approach to what I do. And I take that approach with coaching. I don't like always take what I've seen elsewhere and apply it directly, to a new place, because it might not work. So I always like to get to the bottom of things and start with the why, with the problem, and go from there. And the team launch canvas has been quite good to help me get to the bottom of things, because it's quite dynamic. So, when I start working in a place, if I see some gaps, I can always pick and choose different modules from the canvas. So that's why it is one of my go-to tools in coaching. Um, I also want to talk a little bit about, and just quietly reference a little bit that, when I did have the twins, it was like right before COVID. And before COVID, like, we were all in the office working face to face, and I had this intense fear of coming back during COVID and coaching remotely. That was a huge fear for me. And some of you might be listening to this, might be familiar with Farnaz, who's also part of Remote AF. But I still remember to this day, reaching out to Farnaz and asking her, how do you do this? How do you do this remotely? How does it work? So, it was a really big transition for me, going from face-to-face coaching, having the twins, and then trying to come back and coach remotely. And the team launch canvas was so instrumental in helping me, come back into coaching and feel like I had the right canvas and tool set to be able to do what I did before, but in a remote context. So I guess that's why I'm so passionate about the canvas, and why it's something that's very firmly my tool set and I use quite a lot. So I'm going to talk a little bit about when I use the canvas, or what are the signals. So And if you're familiar with the facilitation guide, this sort of mirrors a lot about what I'm about to say. But when I started a new client, there's a couple of scenarios where I lean on the canvas. And the first one is, if there's new teams or there's been a bit of a reshuffle, they have maybe have had a bit of a reorg, or there's been team changes, a bit of a reset. So that for me is a really good signal that this team sort of needs the canvas to sort of define how they want to work together. The other signals that we call out in the facilitation guide. So yes, if the team's split across multiple time zones or locations, you might have people in the office, you might have people, not in the same state. This can really the canvas can really sort of help establish the communication lines and the ways of working. The big one for me, and the one that I sort of it's a real big signal to me. If I sense that the team is lacking cohesion, if things feel uncomfortable. So, usually when I start somewhere new, I say, can I sit in your sprint planning, or how you get together? Can I sit in and observe, essentially? So, and if I feel like it feels off, like you can kind of cut the air like butter. Do you know what I mean? It's just, the culture's not feeling quite right. People talking over each other. You can sense there's a bit of disrespect going on. That's when I kind of feel, well, I think we need a bit of a reset. I think we need to define the behaviours a little bit more, call out what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. So that's another big signal for me. And I can recall a recent time where I sat in a sprint planning that just wasn't a sprint planning, and there was a lot of people talking over each other, and we walked out of there and the team did not have any clarity of what they needed to do, what the plan was. So that was a really big indicator for me that we need to just to stop and reset. So they're the sort of signals that I look out for, and they're cues for me to sort of maybe talk to the team about doing a team launch using the canvas. In terms of how I prepare for the using the canvas, there is quite a bit of preparation, and some teams will want to invest more effort in the preparation than others, and that's fine. I can recall last year I ran the canvas for a team, and they did a little bit of preparation, and I said that's fine, but they really wanted to invest. They happily set aside a full day to do the whole canvas, because they were in a bit of trouble and they knew they needed to reset some behaviours and establish some ways of working. The point that team were in, they'd be running for 9 months, and they'd just kind of been thrown together. There was no sort of getting to know you, and that's what led to some of those undesirable behaviours I was talking about earlier. But they set aside the whole day happily, and we made a day of it, right? We got catering. They were even invested in some senior leaders to come along and sort of, give a bit of a like a speech at the start to sort of encourage the team and reinforce that the work they're doing is really important. So, but they were in a really bad state. They've been running for 9 months, hadn't delivered a thing, and it was just getting to the point where it was causing a lot of friction within the team. So that was, and after that day, there was a lot of, I guess the team sort of felt the benefit. They had a way to move forward, and whenever they got stuck, we could always point them back to the canvas to sort of set us back on the track.
Yeah, that's something I like about the canvases too. I think it's a really good point that you pick up there. And for those listening, it's a living canvas. It's
Yes,
not a dead canvas. So the point that you say you bring them back to the canvas is because it does need to be reinvigorated, or it serves as, well, these are the things that we agreed we were going to do. So I think that's really,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not something you set and forget, and yeah, it should always, yeah, whenever we step out of line or there's a bit of confusion, like it should be something that grounds the team. So in terms of preparation, usually I reach out to, if there's some sort of delivery lead or team lead or scrum master, align with them. If I've been observing the team for a while, I'll sort of make suggestions about what modules I think they should cover. Um, understand their problems first, right? Understand, what's already working well, because they're potentially modules you might, skip over. Maybe they've done some of the modules before. In that case, you might copy that and put that in the canvas and maybe just refresh if necessary. Um, but also, what's causing the biggest issues? Is it around decision making? Do the team are frustrated they don't have enough authority? Are they not achieving the outcomes in the ceremonies? So they're the modules you'd sort of prioritize and make sure, you center them and do them potentially first. Or you spend more time on them, and maybe the others you sort of, gloss over a little bit or even skip. And that's, one of the best things about this canvas. It's modular. You pick and choose the things you want to cover. Um, I always give the team the option to do some pre-work. So some of you might be familiar with STATIC, which stands for Systems Thinking Approach to Introduce Kanban. And it ties in really nicely with the module Visualize the Work. So if we do, and a lot of teams that I work with opt for this, it's a little workshop that I run that sort of, helps them understand the work that they do, how it flows, what are the different states. If we spend a little bit more extra time on that, that work we can sort of pre-populate. That's part of the pre-work for that particular module in the canvas. Um, Also, think about, once you've sort of had the discussion with the delivery lead, think about what the agenda is. So you want to put, sort of think, how much time am I going to spend on some of these modules? I'm going to spend more time on this because it's really important. I'm just going to do a quick refresh of that. So you want to sort of draw up an agenda. Maybe we put some rough timings in there. Sometimes I've worked with teams that only want to run 3 of the modules. You could say, okay, maybe it'll take an hour and a half. Others want to do the whole thing, and sometimes it's taken honestly more than a day. We've had to come back the next day and spend a bit more time finishing it off. But also go with the pace of the team, what they're comfortable to cover. I always check in before I run a module and talk what the module's about, introduce it, and make sure they're comfortable to participate and do it. If you're doing it in person, book a space. That's really important, and make sure you're familiar with the technology. How to hook up your laptop and things like that. Um, if you're hybrid, some people attend in person and some joining remotely. Obviously, make sure that you've got dial-in details and things like that. If it's a whole day thing, definitely organise catering. It just makes it a bit more special, and teams feel like it's a me day or a us day. I think that's really important. Obviously, optional is a guest speaker. I've ran Team Launch before where we've had that, and it's been a really nice addition to the exercise. The other thing that I typically do is combine Story Me as well, and potentially Team of Teams Launch that can go on either side of that. So yeah, Story Me is another really useful exercise to do. Um, that team that I was referring to that was in a bit of trouble. Um, I made a point of it and said, "Look, I'm new, and I want you to know me a little bit better. It'd be really great. You haven't done something like this before. If we could all, share our story me's." And at the end of it, the team members were like, wow, we've been working together so long and we didn't know these things about each other. We should have done this like months ago. So, it's just always such a great thing to do. And it's just such low effort, low barrier to entry. Like it's fun as well. So it's always a great way. I always make a point of it when I join a new team. So I'm going to tell you a bit about myself and I bring up my story me. So it's really good. I am going to share my screen now because I'm going to talk to the Team Launch canvas. And let me just make sure I'm on the right space. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, there you are.
Thank you. So this is a real team launch canvas that I used with a client. Obviously, it's been desensitized, but you can see sort of the layout that I go with, and some of the pre-work that's gone into this. So you can see on the left-hand side, I've got my agenda here. Talking a little bit about what the team launch is, and then I've got sort of a rough agenda. I've got breaks in there. but I've got rough timings in there. So, obviously things don't always go to plan. Sometimes teams want to spend more time on a particular module. I don't ever like to rush anything. So if they want to spend more time, I let them go with it, and I sort of make up the time elsewhere if I can. So this particular team was in person. And so some of the modules I actually ran on a whiteboard because I thought that would be more interactive. So we're not
Yeah,
sitting
very
down
good.
the whole time on our laptops. So I actually did the team behaviors on the whiteboard. So I actually drew up the 4 quadrants, and we stood around it and we had a bit of a discussion, about each of the areas, and chucked our post-its in there. Um, Now, it is a bit of more work for the coach. I did take all these post-its and type them up because I wanted them to have a readable, legible, copy of all the feedback. So that's what I did afterwards. Um, it is a bit of extra work, but I felt the team got a lot better interaction, better quality interaction from doing that exercise in person. Team behaviors, I always get really good stories shared in that exercise. And, it can get quite emotional as well. Like some team members, particularly, when they talk about support you can count on from other members of the team, I've had people share really intimate stories about when they were really stuck, or, someone in their family had just passed away, and the support and understanding that their manager showed them, just made them feel that they were seen, they were understood and respected and heard. So um, doing things like this can really, and people sort of, when you see these stories start to be shared, you can see, the team's becoming more vulnerable, and that's really helping the team sort of gel and trust each other. So doing this exercise definitely helps build that trust. So usually in terms of how I facilitate it, look, I'll talk about what the vibe of this team should be. I'll ask everyone what they think, and they'll I might give them 2 minutes just to brainstorm or jot something down on a post-it, and then we'll go through and we'll have a conversation about it. And then that's when the real gold comes out, where people share real stories about how they've felt, or instances where someone's supported them. So that's a really great exercise.
Just a little side note with that, and Carla's talking about the board. With the release 2 version of the framework, all of these are now available in fully printable versions. So you can actually print them as A0 or etc. So it saves you having to do the actual drawing of it all up as well. So
Oh, that's good to know. Yes. So if I go to the top of the remote team alliance section, look, team name, usually that's one that I usually pre-fill. Most teams are pretty happy with the team names that they have. I don't know. Lately, I haven't found teams being very creative with this. Usually, the name of the team says exactly what they do. Like, we're a finance team. We're called finance. So I'm not sure. Maybe that'll evolve. Maybe when the team gets more comfortable with each other, they might have like a pseudo team name. But usually, they just go with the name that kind of talks to the type of work that they do. Um, Team purpose. Look, I usually use this amazing template that we have here. I find it really useful. So the team, who they are, their mission, and what I always give the team the option. So I say, look, if you've got a team purpose, that might be something that's pre-filled, and we share and we revisit. But otherwise, I say, you've got a blank canvas here. You can blank post-it. You can write whatever you want, or you can use this handy template here that might give you ideas. So sometimes I get teams sort of, take post-its, and or I usually ask people to break up into pairs because we want a little bit of that brainstorming happening. So I might have, 3 groups of 2, for example, and they'll each add their post-its to each of these sections. And that, I like to split people up so we get a bit more variety, a bit, it makes it a bit more interesting and different perspectives. So, once I've given time for people to brainstorm, then we go through the post-its and we line on which out of the 2 or 3 resonates most with the team. And usually my homework after that is to string it all together, and have one big purpose statement. So that's how I usually run the team purpose module. The next module, situational empathy. Now, um, one of the hexagons, I'm not sure if anyone's noticed, is missing, and that is on purpose. So the hexagon that's missing said, I like to have my camera switched off, or something along those lines. And really interestingly, I think we have to be mindful sometimes that some of these things are deeply personal to some people. And the situation that I encountered at a client was, I was having a discussion as part of the pre-work and the preparation, about this module, just aligning with the Scrum Master. Were you okay to run this module? And they saw that hexagon. They said, I don't think that's appropriate. Everyone needs to have their camera on.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, why do you think that? And the reason was, well, because we don't, what it came down to was, well, whenever we have a meeting, we want cameras on, because if cameras are off, then people are not working. They're going doing other stuff. They're cooking, they're cleaning, they're not working. So very strong opinions. Some people have very strong opinions about some of these hexagons, and I think sometimes you need to respect that. Like, they had a very
Yeah.
firm stance on it, and hence why I removed the hexagon. Now, as a follow up conversation I had with the team lead at the time was, you know, I guess I wanted to introduce a different perspective, in that, I could have my camera switched on and looking at you, but doesn't mean that I'm necessarily listening to you, right? Or participating, or really understanding what's going on. So um, just because we have cameras on, that does not equal productivity. And the other thing that this team was lacking was, they didn't have any metrics, right? They weren't measuring productivity at all. So I said, look, I'm fine. Let's not talk about cameras being switched on. It was a big sore point for the team. Um, just like a water going around a rock. I thought, we're not going to tackle that in this canvas, in this session. So I guess it's knowing where the sore points are. And if I did have the hexagon there, it would have resulted in a really long, argumentative conversation. I didn't want that to put a dampener on the session. So it was something that I chose to address, via the metrics module.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that situational empathy. Preferred hours is usually a really straightforward module, right? And really relevant, because not all of us are in the office all the time. Most of us are hybrid. Some of us have obligations that we can't be at our desk, the whole day. Some of us, like, I'm one of these people that, sometimes likes to work late at night. I need that flexibility in my work arrangements. So usually I just get people to say, call out what's going on, call out, what your hours are, when you'll be in the office, and someone said here, if out of office, please let team know in Teams channel. So that's a little agreement that came up there. Some people have kids. A lot of people called out, they have school pickup drop offs. They also mentioned, they don't want no lunch meetings. So, that sort of come up in that module. So that's usually pretty quick module, but super helpful. Your windows of opportunity, when to have your
Yeah.
ceremonies and things like that. So extremely beneficial. Um, Virtual collaboration. So sometimes I use this one. Opportunity for the team to sort of reflect on and on the tools and techniques they use to collaborate. So you can see quite a few tools called out here. Sometimes I think in this particular exercise we did this one pretty quickly. It was straightforward, but there might be aspects of some tools that, whilst the team thinks it's an enabler, there might be aspects or features within a tool that might be a constraint. Sometimes it's not always black and white. The post-it fits in a quadrant. So it's important to, I guess, draw out those conversations. For example, we have to use Jira. The organisation's asking us to use it, but we find it's a lot of overhead, for example. And it's like, okay, why do you find it overhead? Because we spend our time creating the same tickets. And it's like, okay, well, have you looked at automation, for example? No. And then what happens is, we'll create some actions down here. So the team will go away and explore that, or there's a follow-ups to make the tool, I guess, more suitable to their needs and help collaboration a bit more. So that's a really good exercise to get the team aligned on the tools they use, particularly if you know the organisation is not quite organised and it's free for all and everyone gets to use whatever tool they want. But usually that's not the case. But that's where this module is extremely helpful. I'll move on to system of work. So I mentioned earlier that, you know, usually the pre-work for this, most of the time I do a static session, and that feeds into this. So usually this is pre-work for me, but sometimes I run the static session with a smaller group. And, you know, if the team's super big, I might not invite all of them, might just get key people to contribute to the static. So if I do that, then I use the time in the session to sort of, you know, share this, or get someone else that was in the static session to share the outputs of that static with the rest of the team, so everyone's on the same page. So, you know, as an example here, you know, they've got the demand source, they've got where work's coming from, the 3 different types of work, the type of work it is, and the process it goes through, the workflow that goes through before it lands on the team's Scrum and Kanban boards. And this is how the team's, you know, Jira boards were set up. So the teams have an understanding where their work's coming from and the process it goes through before it hits their Kanban boards. So look, if you're not doing the static beforehand, then you might need to spend a bit of time in this particular module getting this set up. But yeah, it may or may not be super straightforward. If you might need to invest a bit of time and maybe look at the static approach just to, you know, round it out a bit.
Yeah, there's a question here that's quite, I'll ask on that one. The question that's come through: how long? How long does it take to do the static versus how long does it take to do the module? So I know that's a bit grey, but
yeah. Look, when I've ran, it depends how far you want to go, and I know that's probably not the answer that person was asking for, but you know, with the static, you know, we can go as far as not only define the workflow, we can go to definitions of ready, definitions of done. What are the activities that happen at each point? You know, what are the sources of dissatisfaction from the customer perspective? What are the different work item types and what are the workflows of each of those? So, you know, I've ran static sessions that run from a couple of hours to half a day, you know, as an example, because, you know, some teams want, you know, all that clarity, want to do the 8 steps of static. You know, if you look at this module and you know, you talk to the Scrum Master and they're like, look, just defining or getting a board structure is enough. You know, maybe you could, you know, maybe they've got an existing, they're already using a board, you know, and maybe it's just about visualizing that here and making sure, just doing a quick reflection with the team. Like, do these states make sense? Is this actually our workflow? Maybe that's what you do in this module. So, you know, it could be half an hour or it could be half a day. It depends, you know, to what level you want to go to. Does that make sense, Tony?
that makes absolute sense to me, and that was the way we designed it as well, because the canvases were for small organisations, large, middle size. So depending on, and it goes for the teams as well, right? So
Yeah.
in those teams, they could be teams that have got a lot of complexity or a little. So I think that's a great answer. I know it's the coaching answer. It depends.
I know.
Fortunately,
I cringed as I said it.
unfortunately, that's how it
Yeah.
rolls in our world. And the other question on this one is: do you get pushback from leadership on why you want to do this?
I don't think I have got that much pushback, and I think it comes down to, as long as you, when I present these modules, I always start with the benefit that they'll get out of doing it. So, you know, I would present this module as saying, you know, do you have a way to visualize your work? You know, if you don't, doing this module will give you clarity on how your work gets done. What is the workflow and what are the steps to delivering that piece of work? But also give you visibility of some of the things you might not know, like how does work come into your backlog? So I think if you always position it from, doing this module, this is what you'll get out of it. Then that gives people a really clear understanding, or it makes the decision a lot more clear about whether or not doing this module is right for them. So, yeah.
Great answer. Great answer.
Okay.
Continue on, my friend.
Yes. Okay. So some of the other modules down here, look, decision design, really good one. If there's been a bit of friction in the team around, lack of autonomy, or maybe perhaps how some decisions, are a bit ambiguous about who makes what decisions. This is always, I've had some teams sort of say, nah, we know exactly who makes what decisions and we've skipped over it. Whereas for others, it's been a little bit blurry. So it's also good, to play this back to the team of teams, or the leadership as well, and make sure that they're on the same page about, who makes what decisions here. So, what they decide as individuals, decide as a team, and escalate. We've got things to check with, Bob and Fred, that's the case, who might be sitting outside the team. Also, what's came out of this one is there's some decisions that are unknown and to be defined. So there's some follow-up actions there for us to, discover who makes those decisions. Support and constraints. I haven't. I've used this sometimes. So I remember the last time I used this, I didn't need to use it, sorry, because the team had recently been reset. So a lot of thought had been gone into, we're making this a cross-functional team. We want to make sure the teams are set up for success and they have all the capabilities and that they need to be able to deliver value. So, those sorts of teams might not want to do this. Whereas teams that sort of have lots of dependencies or rely on people external to the team may really want to lean into this a little bit more. So, yeah, I've, some teams like to use it, other teams not so much. It just depends on the team and the team structure. Are they cross-functional or are they not? Team measures. So for this team in particular, it was super important, because they had concerns around productivity. I usually dig out that, and I haven't got it here, but in the facilitation guide, there's a bit of a snapshot of some of the metrics, the agile metrics. I usually put that in there because, some teams don't always know what cycle time means. So it's always good to have that handy reference next to that. And I usually have that screenshot off the side here. And I might spend some time introducing the different metrics. And then I'll ask the team, do any of these metrics resonate with you? Are you interested in measuring any of those? And then I'll capture what they're interested in measuring over here. So that's a pretty straightforward exercise. There's a gap here, and this is where the team of teams canvas comes really handy. So, sometimes, usually I do the team of teams if I can before doing the team launch canvas, because some of the metrics that the team of team wants to measure, that's where it feeds into this, and that's where you'd capture it here. So I know for this particular client, we've done the team of teams, and they said, we want to measure customer SLAs, but we haven't defined them. So that was something that they needed to do. Now, once they had those SLAs, that's something that I'd probably put in this box down here, and because that's important information to the team as well. Down the bottom here, organizational policies. This does not need much time at all, and this is a really good one to pre-fill. So, things about, I'm sure you're aware, Tony, more and more that people are being asked to come back to the office. I know it's mandated for some of the clients I'm working with. They have to be back in the office 66%. That's where you sort of capture it here. And, okay, we have to be in the office 3 days a week. Which 3 days do we want to be at? So make sure that the teams, the team might want to be in together on those 3 days. Things like, are there any company policies like working hours? Are there policies around, when you take leave? Is there forced leave? Are there policies around you need to be on call? They're the sorts of things that come up in that section. Like I said, something I pre-fill, and I just make sure that the team's aware of it. Roles and expectations, another great one to pre-fill. Once, the team, once team lead sent me all the PDs for everyone in his team, and I just used that to fill this out. And I said in the session, everyone just check that what we've captured there for roles and responsibilities makes sense, because that's what's off your PD. So that was a really quick way and I just asked everyone in the team just to, spend literally a minute just talking to their role and their responsibility. And then, obviously we've got that any gaps section, which is really valuable, where the team have called out some things that are missing in their team. Um, but otherwise, if you're not doing the pre-fill, allow maybe 5-10 minutes to, no, probably about 10 minutes to, it depends on the size of your team, right? Give you the consultant answer. Yeah, for their people to capture what they think their responsibilities are, and have a conversation with the team about it. And then through that conversation, identify if there's any gaps.
Question for you on that one before you move.
Yeah.
The question is, do you then play that back to the leaders? Which is interesting.
Absolutely, always. And you know what? Leaders are usually pretty interested. Obviously they've invested time in me. Coaching the team. They want to usually see what we've been working on. So I usually do give a summary back to the leaders, but also, I highlight to them the things that they need to lean into to support the team. Some of those things that are outside the team's control, like some of those gaps you're seeing in the roles and expectations, or in that module we looked at above, support and constraints. And the actions in there, ask for more or action escalate, that they're the things that the leadership need to lean into and help the team address. So really good idea to always play this back, high level summary. Actually, when I did this in person, that's exactly what happened. Leadership came at the start of the day, and then they came back at the end of the day, and they asked the team to play this back to them. So I didn't have to do any talking. It was brilliant. Everyone in the team presented back the modules that we'd worked on. So and they called out, I need your support in this. So it was a really beneficial from that perspective. Team got to talk to the leadership directly, and tell them what they needed.
Fantastic.
Yes, and the last section, which is operational cadence. Usually, how I facilitate this, I just ask people to brainstorm, any of the ways that they need to communicate with each other. And then as they're going through that, we'll group them. There's going to be a lot of overlap. So, as a facilitator, you need to lean in and sort of group those common themes. And then, go through each one. So, I'll say, for example, you've got here a system outage that you need to work on that together to solve. What tools do you use? Are you going to use email? Probably not. Like, you're going to, if it's an urgent, level 1 sort of incident, you're probably going to pick up the phone, and you're probably going to classify that as an emergency. So we go through each one of these and make sure the team are really comfortable with, the how we've classified the communication, the tool that they'll use, and the expected response time. Now,
That's
some of these might. Sorry, Tony.
that's the one for me, Carla. I think is the one I always see people get value out of, because the team generally knows the things that you're talking about up there. But when you actually say, what's the expected response time, that's an interesting thing, because sometimes
Yes.
you connect. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's the one that I see quite often gets value in this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. And you'll find that the team sometimes have different ideas about, what the appropriate response time is. So it's really good to spend time on this, and create that space for them to align. And some of these, they might have a couple of answers. So you can see some of these boxes have 2 lines coming out of them. So, for example, a general request, depending on that request, is some people feel that they might respond within the hour to a day, and they're comfortable with that. So it doesn't always have to be one response. Um, yeah, so the other thing is, some of this might get a bit messy. So I did start sort of color coding the some of the lines. You might find that really helpful. So yes, that is channels of communication, and lucky last is the team events. Now, Agile is not a very new concept or methodology. So I feel like everyone by now knows what a stand up is and a sprint planning. So I usually don't like to leave these blank. And I usually like to pre-fill these. That's just how I work. That's my preference. I know, some people like to do this blank and let the team come up with it. Depending on the organisation, if they already have established ways of working or playbook, I usually pull what's in that and use that and populate that in here. So I'm not reinventing the wheel for them. So I'll use what they've got and I'll pre-fill it here. And if this is the last exercise we do in the day, I'll make it fun. I'll get chocolates. I'll get everyone to stand up and I'll say, "Hey, what's the purpose of sprint planning?" Like I won't even refer to this, and if they say the right answer, I'll chuck them a chocolate. You've got to insert some fun into the day. So, because sitting down and reading through each one of these is a little bit mind numbing. So, and most people know what these are about. So yeah, that's probably it's probably one of the more straightforward modules that I run through. Um, some of these teams might have some nuances in terms of the way they want to run it. Run some of these, like stand ups. I usually hear, oh, stand up after party. Like if people want to talk about things with certain team members but don't want to interrupt the stand up, they'll have the after party. So little things like that, little agreements. You might chuck in here that might be unique to some of the teams. But apart from that, that's in a nutshell how I run Team Launch Canvas.
That's fantastic. I like that last bit you're saying, the team after party. So you know a good stand up when that's happening. But if you're doing this in remote, that's why we call it out in that particular canvas, because if it's fully remote, even if it's hybrid, how do you do that, right? So you may have to set up a couple of rooms.
Yeah.
Extra time in your meeting
Mm.
to allow that conversation to happen, because
Yes.
otherwise you lose that nuance. And when people go, then it doesn't come back. So just
That's right.
So,
yeah,
Carla, that's fantastic. There's a couple of quick questions I held on to
yeah,
because we are getting close to our time. But one of the biggest ones I think there is I'm just reading through it. It says living canvas. So I think they're picking up what we said at the beginning there.
mm.
Canvas. So how often do you revisit it?
Look, I think when required, like as a coach, depending how long I'm engaged with a team, if I see some behavior slip or or someone new joins the team, actually that's a really good one. As soon as someone new joins the team, then I will spend some time, or I'll suggest to scrum masters to sit them down and walk them through this, right, and make sure they're really comfortable with what's on here. But if I see sort of, communication slipping or, some friction in the team, maybe it's around communication, maybe it's around decision making, or they're not like, that's a signal for me that we need to come back to the canvas. And maybe it's not another meeting. Maybe you use part of your retrospective for that. Use a reflection meeting that you've already got. So I think the answer for that, annoyingly, is it depends. But a really clear signal for me is when there's team changes, so new people coming in.
Great. And the other question, we've got time for one more question, and I held on to this one, was the pre-filling. You talk about pre-filling quite often. Do you get pushbacks from teams when you pre-fill it on their behalf?
Never. I don't think I've ever got, because people don't want to spend a long time in a meeting. So no, I think it's always been accepted with gratitude. That's my feeling, unless they're not telling me something. But
Well,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
consultants, we get that. I agree with you, and I think I've used that myself, because I think then it becomes a confirmation and a conversation
yeah,
session rather
yeah.
than the creation of the total thing that's already around. So,
Yeah, and you the team is spending, like, you're right, less time creating and more time thinking or critiquing. Sometimes
yeah,
it's easier for people to have something up there like a straw man for them to critique and modify and adjust. So, yeah, I think doing pre-work is definitely a good idea, because there is a lot of stuff on here, right? Like there's a lot of stuff to cover. So if you can save time, I think it's always a good thing.
yeah, brilliant. Look, we're at the end of our time, so it's been fantastic having you on at Talking Remote. Thank you so much, Carla. It's
Thank
been
you for having me.
fantastic. Oh, it's great to have you on. If you're watching this, of course, don't forget, you want to know more about this, go to Remote AF, click on the tools, and you'll find all of these different tools there. You can engage with us. Carla, how can they get in touch with you if they want to touch base?
Probably just LinkedIn's probably the best way to get me. So Carla Billeci, Billeci. Otherwise, from my elaborate email, carla.belleci@elaborate.com.au.
There you go. So that's fantastic. And don't forget, join our Remote AF community. Go to remoteaf.co. Click on the button at the top. Join our community where we're talking about this stuff. And don't forget, grab yourself a copy of our new white paper on dynamically adaptive organisations. You'll find that in the show notes. Carla, fantastic to have you on at Talking Remote. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for today.
Thanks, Tony. It's been a pleasure for me too.